ocean floor. Feet in the sand, we ask for more. Rhythm of the tide, a gentle roar. Highland glow, let it show. Feel the beat, let it.
The humid air of Umuafor hung heavy with the scent of palm wine and unfulfilled promises. Chibuzo Okafor, known throughout the southeast as Ezego, the king of money, sat on his veranda, watching the sun bleed crimson across the Niger Delta skyline. At 73, his face was a map of Nigeria's turbulent history, each wrinkle a story of survival, resistance, and ultimately, unimaginable wealth. But tonight, wealth felt like ash in his mouth. The discovery that had changed everything happened 42 years ago, when foreign geologists drilling test wells on what they dismissively called worthless swampland struck black gold beneath his family's ancestral compound. The oil that bubbled up from the earth had transformed Chibuzo from a schoolteacher into one of Africa's most formidable tycoons. Yet that transformation had been built on a foundation of bitterness that time had only calcified into something harder, more unforgiving. Chibuzo's earliest memories were painted in blood and betrayal. As a boy of 8, he had watched Portuguese traders, men with skin the color of spoiled milk and eyes like winter ice, chain his uncle Namdi to 14 other men from neighboring villages. The slave traders had smiled as they worked, their teeth flashing white against sunburned faces, as if they were loading cargo rather than destroying families. His uncle's screams still visited him in dreams, 5 decades later. Then came the British, with their starched uniforms and forked tongues, who strip-mined the delta of its resources while leaving nothing but polluted waterways and broken promises. Chibuzo had watched his father, once proud and upright, bend and scrape before pink-faced administrators who could barely pronounce their village name. He watched his mother die of treatable disease because the colonial hospital turned away natives when white patients needed beds. Every slight, every humiliation, every drop of spilled blood had calcified into a hatred so pure it had become almost religious in its fervor. When the oil money began flowing, Chibuzo had made 2 vows. First, his community would never again bow to light-skinned outsiders. Second, his bloodline would remain uncompromised, pure, rooted in the red earth of Igboland. He had kept those vows for 42 years. Until now. The sound of a car engine disrupted his brooding. Chibuzo's heart stuttered in his chest, a peculiar mixture of joy and dread. His daughter Amara was home. Amara Okafor had always been her father's pride, the brightest flame in his empire of oil and influence. At 28, she possessed her father's sharp intelligence and her late mother's grace. Her mother, Adiz, had died bringing her into the world, a loss that had nearly broken Chibuzo but had also made him pour all his formidable love and ambition into raising their only child. He had given her everything: the finest schools in Lagos, a degree from the University of Ibadan, and recently, a 2-year advanced hospitality management course in Manila, Philippines. The Philippines had seemed safe enough, distant, insulated, non-white. Chibuzo had reasoned that Asian nations, having suffered their own colonial wounds, would be suitable for his daughter's education without the corrupting influence of Europeans or Americans. Before she left, he had gathered her hands in his voice dropping to that particular timbre that meant the words were not suggestions but commandments. "Amara, my child," he had said, "you carry more than yourself when you travel. You carry our ancestors, our history, our future. The blood that runs in your veins is sacred, purchased with the suffering of generations. I have chosen Obinna Ezike for you. He understands our ways, our traditions. He is Igbo to his bones. When you return, we will formalize the arrangements." Obinna was the son of Chibuzo's closest associate, educated, wealthy in his own right, and most importantly, untainted by foreign influence. The marriage had been understood since Amara was 21, though never officially announced. And Amara, her father had added, his grip tightening, I have seen what happens when our women are seduced by Oyobo men and their pale cousins. They return hollow, cut off from their roots, bearing children who belong nowhere. Whatever you see in Manila, whatever temptations present themselves, remember who you are. Remember that I would rather have no daughter than one who betrays her blood. Amara had nodded, kissed his weathered cheek, and boarded the plane with those words wrapped around her throat like a noose. Manila had been a revelation. The Philippines throbbed with a different energy than Nigeria, chaotic in its own way but threaded with a warmth that surprised her. The streets of Malate, where her school was located, pulsed with jeepneys painted in psychedelic colors, the smell of adobo and sinigang wafting from roadside eateries, and a peculiar blend of Asian and Spanish colonial influences that created something entirely unique. She had promised herself she would remain focused. Studies only. No distractions. Certainly no romance. But fate, Amara would later reflect, has a wicked sense of humor. Diego Santillan entered her life during her third week in Manila, when she got hopelessly lost trying to find a fabric market in Divisoria. She had been standing at a chaotic intersection, her phone dead, her map useless, near tears from frustration, when a voice behind her said in accented but clear English, "You look like you're trying to find something that isn't on any tourist map." She had turned to find a man about her age, perhaps 30, with warm brown skin several shades lighter than hers, black hair that fell across his forehead, and eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. He was lean, dressed simply in jeans and a faded band t-shirt, with paint stains on his hands. "I'm trying to find the textile district," she had admitted, "but I think I've somehow ended up in every other district first." "Ah, a quest for fabric. Very noble." His smile widened. "I'm Diego. Professional starving artist, amateur city guide. I happen to know exactly where you need to go, and I happen to be heading that direction. May I?" She should have said no. Should have thanked him politely and found her own way. But there was something disarming about him, a gentleness that felt rare and genuine. "Amara," she had said, offering her hand. "And yes, please. I'm clearly hopeless at navigation." That afternoon stretched into evening as Diego not only guided her to the fabric market, but showed her hidden corners of Manila that no guidebook mentioned. A tiny gallery showcasing local artists, a bookshop crammed with Filipino literature, a rooftop where the city sprawled beneath them like a living thing. She learned that Diego was a painter who taught art classes to underprivileged children to pay his rent. His father had died when he was young. His mother worked as a nurse in Dubai, sending money home that Diego tried to supplement with his art. He spoke about his work with a passion that reminded Amara of her father speaking about building schools and hospitals in Umuafor. That same fire of wanting to leave something meaningful behind. "Why painting?" she had asked as they watched the sun set over Manila Bay. Diego had been quiet for a moment, his eyes distant. "Because during the worst of times, during martial law, during poverty, during pain, Filipinos never stopped creating beauty. Art is resistance. Art is memory. Art says, I was here, I mattered, I saw the world and made something of it. I guess I want to give that to kids who are told they don't matter." It was that answer that first cracked open her heart. They began as friends. Amara told herself that friendship was permissible, that her father's warnings applied to romance, not simple human connection. Diego became her guide to Manila, and she became his window into West Africa. Sharing stories of Lagos's organized chaos, teaching him Igbo phrases that made him laugh when his pronunciation mangled the tones, introducing him to jollof rice at a Nigerian restaurant in Makati that made her almost weep with homesickness. 3 months in, Amara realized she was in love with him. 6 months in, on a night when the rain hammered against Diego's small studio apartment and they had been talking for hours about everything and nothing, he kissed her. She kissed him back, and in that moment, Every warning from her father evaporated like rain on hot pavement. She knew it was wrong, not morally wrong, but wrong according to the code she'd been raised with, wrong in ways that would shatter her father's world. Yet being with Diego felt more right than anything she'd ever known. He saw her not as Easygo's daughter, not as a bargaining chip in tradition's endless negotiations, but simply as Amara, brilliant, funny, complicated human. Their relationship unfolded in secret. Amara told her classmates she was seeing someone but remained vague. She video-called her father weekly and lied by omission, speaking about her classes and the city, but never mentioning the man who had colonized her heart. Diego, for his part, struggled with his own guilt. "Your father will hate me," he said one night, his hand resting on her stomach, which had just begun to show the smallest swell of new life. They had discovered the pregnancy 2 weeks earlier. Amara had stood in Diego's cramped bathroom, staring at the positive test, feeling the earth shift beneath her feet. "My father hates everyone who isn't Igbo," Amara had replied, her voice brittle. "His hatred isn't about you, Diego. It's about history, about wounds that never healed. But I won't let his pain dictate my future." "And the baby?" Diego's voice was soft, tentative. Amara had placed her hand over his. "Our baby. Our choice. Our family." But even as she said it, dread pooled in her stomach. Because she knew her father, knew the depths of his convictions, knew that this would be the ultimate betrayal in his eyes. The pregnancy had gone smoothly, considering the circumstances. Diego had been present for everything: the ultrasounds, the morning sickness, the late-night fears and hopes. They had discussed marriage, but Amara had been hesitant. Not because she doubted her love, but because marrying before facing her father felt like cowardice. "I need to tell him first," she had insisted. "Face to face. He deserves that at least." Diego had wanted to come with her, to stand beside her when she revealed everything. But Amara knew that would be disastrous. Her father needed to hear this from her alone, needed time to process before meeting the man who had, in his view, destroyed everything he'd planned. She gave birth to a son 3 months before her course ended. They named him Emeka, an Igbo name meaning great things or great deeds. The child was extraordinary, a perfect alchemy of his parents. He had Amara's rich dark skin, but with undertones of Diego's lighter complexion creating a warm golden brown. His features were a striking blend. Amara's full lips and broad nose softened slightly by Diego's Filipino heritage, creating a face that was wholly unique and heartbreakingly beautiful. But what stunned everyone in the delivery room was how much baby Emeka resembled Chibuzo. The same intense eyes, the same determined set to his tiny jaw, even the same way his forehead creased when he cried. It was as if genetics had played a cosmic joke, reaching back to Amara's father and stamping his image onto this child of 2 worlds. "He looks like a king," Diego had whispered, tears streaming down his face as he held his son for the first time. "He looks like my father," Amara had replied, laughing and crying simultaneously. God has a twisted sense of humor. They had spent 3 months as a family in Manila, precious, stolen time where reality felt suspended. But Amara's return date loomed, and with it, the reckoning she'd been dreading. Diego wanted desperately to accompany her, but Amara was firm. "Give me 2 weeks. Let me talk to him, let him rage, let him process. Then if you haven't heard from me, if something goes terribly wrong, you come. But I need to do this first part alone." The day before her departure, Diego had painted a portrait of the 3 of them, Amara, himself, and baby Emeka. In the painting, they were standing on a bridge between 2 shores, neither fully on one side nor the other, but together in that liminal space. "For courage," he had said, giving it to her. And to remind him that love isn't betrayal. Love is the bridge we build across history's wounds. Now, as the car rolled up the palm tree-lined drive to her father's compound, Amara clutched that rolled canvas in one hand and her sleeping son in the other, and prayed for a miracle. Chibuzo stood as the car door opened, his heart hammering with anticipation. He had imagined this moment 1,000 times, his daughter returning home, accomplished and ready to take her place in the dynasty he'd built, ready to marry Obinna and give him grandchildren who would carry his legacy forward. Amara emerged from the car, and Chibuzo's breath caught. She looked different, more mature, more beautiful, but also changed in some fundamental way that unsettled him. There was a gravity to her now, a weight of experience that made her seem older than her years. "Papa," she said, her voice thick with emotion. She moved toward him, but awkwardly, as if carrying something heavy. It was then that Chibuzo noticed the bundle in her arms. Blue fabric, small shifting movements, the unmistakable contours of an infant. Time seemed to stop. The world narrowed to that bundle, to the impossibility of its presence, to the tidal wave of understanding and fury that began building in Chibuzo's chest. "Amara," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "What is that? Papa, please let me." "What is that?" His voice cracked like thunder across the compound. Several workers who had been welcoming Amara froze, then quickly dispersed. Amara's hands trembled, but she lifted her chin, a gesture so reminiscent of Chibuzo's own stubbornness that it would have made him proud under any other circumstances. "His name is Emeka," she said quietly. "He is your grandson. And before you say anything else, before you explode, before you disown me, look at him. Please, Papa, just look at him." Every instinct screamed at Chibuzo to turn away, to reject this corruption of everything he'd fought for, to cast out this daughter who had betrayed him so profoundly. But something in her voice, that thread of desperation woven with defiance, made him stay rooted. Amara moved closer, carefully unwrapping the blanket to reveal her son's face. Chibuzo looked down, and the world tilted on its axis. The baby was staring at him with dark, solemn eyes that were mirror images of his own. The shape of the face, the set of the brow, even the slight cleft in the chin that Chibuzo had inherited from his own father. It was all there, stamped onto this impossible child. If Chibuzo had been looking at a photograph of himself as an infant, the resemblance could not have been more striking. "This is not possible," Chibuzo whispered, but he couldn't look away. The baby yawned, and even that expression was one Chibuzo recognized from his own mirror. "He looks like you," Amara said softly. "More than I ever did. The ancestors have made their opinion quite clear, I think." "His father," Chibuzo managed, his voice hoarse. "Tell me his father is African. Tell me you found a Nigerian man in Manila, that this child—" "His father is Filipino," Amara said, and though her voice shook, she did not look away from her father's face. "His name is Diego Santillan. He is an artist, a teacher, a good man. And I love him, Papa. I love him the way you loved Mama, with everything I am." The fury that Chibuzo had been holding back erupted. "Get out," he roared. "Get out of my house. You bring this abomination into my home, this proof of your betrayal, and you dare speak to me of love? Your mother died giving you life, and this is how you honor her memory? By spreading your legs for some Asian. Do not speak of what you don't understand." Amara's voice cut through his rage with surprising force. Baby Emeka, startled by the shouting, began to cry, a lusty, indignant wail that echoed across the compound. "You taught me about history, about the wounds our people carry. But you never taught me about healing. You've been so busy hating everyone who isn't us that you've forgotten what it means to be human. I will not have some Filipinos bastard grandson. He is your grandson." Amara shouted back, tears streaming down her face even as she rocked the crying baby. "Your blood runs in his veins as surely as mine does. Look at him, Papa. The ancestors don't make mistakes. If they disapproved, would they have given him your face?" Chibuzo wanted to rage, to order her from his property, to disown her completely. But his eyes kept being drawn back to the child, to Emeka, whose cries were settling into whimpers, whose small fist had closed around Amara's finger with surprising strength, whose face was indeed an uncanny echo of Chibuzo's own. I need time, Chibuzo finally said, his voice cracking with age and anguish. I cannot do this now. Go to your rooms. We will speak tomorrow when I am not so, when I can think clearly. Amara searched her father's face, finding no softness there, only confusion and pain. She nodded slowly and turned toward the house, but paused at the threshold. His middle name is Chibuzo, she said without turning around. Emeka Chibuzo Santian Okafor. Because whatever else happens, he carries you forward. Whether you accept that is your choice. She disappeared into the house, leaving Chibuzo alone on the veranda as night fell around him like judgment. Chibuzo did not sleep that night. He sat in his study, surrounded by the trappings of his wealth. The oil paintings of his ancestors, the photographs of his late wife, the certificates and awards that documented his rise from that terrified 8-year-old boy who watched his uncle dragged away in chains to one of Nigeria's most powerful men. What had it all been for? He had sworn to protect his people, to build a fortress of wealth and influence that could withstand any outside assault. He had envisioned a dynasty, Amara marrying Obinna, their children raised in the old ways, the bloodline continuing pure and unbroken. Instead, his daughter had returned with a child fathered by, what? Not European, not American, but close enough. Another group colonized by Spain, yes, but also colonizers in their own way, always trying to claim they understood because they too had suffered. It wasn't the same. It could never be the same. Or could it? The question invaded Chibuzo's thoughts like a virus, unwelcome but persistent. He had never been to the Philippines, knew little about its history beyond the basics. Had they not been enslaved, invaded, oppressed? Had their people not also been told they were less than human, their culture inferior, their bodies expendable? But that didn't matter, his fury insisted. The point was preservation, continuation, keeping the bloodline pure. Except the child looked exactly like him. Chibuzo had believed in many things throughout his life, in tradition, in racial solidarity, in the sanctity of tribal identity. But he had also always believed in the will of the ancestors. The chi, the personal god, the spiritual force that guided each person's destiny. These were not superstitions but truths as real as the ground beneath his feet. And the ancestors, through some cosmic mechanism he couldn't begin to understand, had looked at this child of two worlds and decided, he will bear the face of his grandfather. He will carry forward the king of money's visage. Was that approval? Challenge? Test? As dawn broke over the delta, painting the polluted waterways in shades of gold and crimson, Chibuzo still had no answers. But he had a decision to make. The situation deteriorated before it could improve. Obinna Azaik arrived at the compound mid-morning, having heard from his father that Amara had returned. He came bearing gifts, gold jewelry, expensive fabric, a Mercedes as an engagement present. He came expecting a wedding to plan. Instead, he found chaos. Chibuzo, exhausted and raw from his sleepless night, had no energy for subtlety. He informed Obinna bluntly that there would be no wedding, that Amara had returned with a child, that everything had changed. Obinna's reaction was volcanic. "You promised me," he shouted at Chibuzo, his careful veneer of education and sophistication cracking to reveal the entitlement beneath. "We had an agreement. I have waited 7 years for her, turned down other matches, built my business with the understanding that I would marry into your family, that our children would unite our fortunes." "Things have changed," Chibuzo repeated, suddenly aware of how hollow the tradition he'd weaponized actually was. Had he really intended to trade his daughter like property? Had he become the very thing he'd despised in those colonial administrators? People who saw humans as assets to be managed? Then unchange them. Obinna's face was twisted with rage. "Send her away, get rid of the bastard child, and we proceed as planned. I don't care if she spread her legs for some Asian dog." The slap came so fast that both men were surprised by it. Chibuzo's palm connected with Obinna's cheek with a crack that echoed through the house. "You will not," Chibuzo said, his voice deadly quiet. Speak about my daughter that way. You will not speak about my grandson that way. Whatever else may be true, they are my blood. And you have just revealed that you never deserved either of them. Obinna staggered back, hand to his reddening cheek, his eyes blazing with humiliation and fury. You're just like your daughter, he spat. Traitors to your own people. I hope that half-breed bastard grows up to spit on everything you've built. I hope. Get out! Chibuzo roared. Get out before I forget I'm an old man and beat you like the spoiled child you are. Obinna fled, but not before delivering a parting shot. Everyone will know about this. Everyone will know that Izigo's daughter is a whore who abandoned her people. Your name will be poison. The door slammed. In the ringing silence that followed, Chibuzo became aware that Amara had been standing at the top of the stairs, witnessing everything, baby Emeka in her arms. Their eyes met. Father and daughter. King and princess. Two people trapped between the past and an uncertain future. Thank you, Amara whispered, for defending us. Even if you still hate what I've done. Chibuzo opened his mouth to respond, but before he could speak, Emeka let out a loud, insistent cry, the universal infant demand for food, comfort, attention. The baby's face scrunched up, and in that moment of distress, he looked so much like Chibuzo's own father that the old man felt something crack inside his chest. I don't hate you, he said, the words dragged from somewhere deep and painful. I'm terrified. For you, for him, for what this means. I spent my whole life building walls to keep us safe, and you've just knocked them down. Maybe, Amara said softly, descending the stairs slowly, maybe the walls were keeping us prisoner, Papa. Maybe safety and stagnation looked the same after a while. She reached the bottom of the stairs and, in a gesture of profound trust, extended the baby toward her father. Hold your grandson, she said. Please. That's all I'm asking right now. Just hold him. Chibuzo's hands trembled as he reached out. He hadn't held an infant since Amara was born, since the moment before they told him his wife had died. He had associated baby weight with loss ever since, had unconsciously avoided his friend's grandchildren, unable to bear that particular ghost. But now, as Emeka settled into the crook of his arm, something ancient and instinctive clicked into place. The baby stopped crying, his dark eyes, so unsettlingly familiar, fixing on Chibuzo's face with intense concentration. He's studying you, Amara said, a ghost of a smile on her face. He does that, like he's trying to memorize faces, understand the world before he has the words for it. Chibuzo looked down at this impossible child, this bridge between worlds that he had never wanted built. And in that moment something shifted. Not acceptance, not yet, but the first, grudging acknowledgement that perhaps the universe had a plan that differed from his own. Tell me about him, Chibuzo said finally. This Filipino. This Diego. Tell me why you chose him over everything I taught you. And so Amara did. They sat together in Chibuzo's study, the baby sleeping now in his grandfather's arms, while Amara told the story she had been terrified to share. She spoke of getting lost in Manila, of a chance encounter that became friendship, of conversations that revealed a kindred spirit. She described Diego's work with underprivileged children, his passion for art as resistance, his gentleness and strength in equal measure. He reminds me of you, Papa, Amara said, and Chibuzo flinched at the comparison. Not in the obvious ways, but in the ways that matter. He believes in lifting his community, in using whatever power he has to protect those who have none. His mother is a nurse working abroad to support them. His father died when he was young. He knows poverty, Papa. He knows struggle. He's not some privileged Oyabo who thinks suffering is philosophical. But he is not Igbo, Chibuzo said, though the words had less venom than before. He cannot understand our history, our ways. No, Amara agreed. Just as I cannot fully understand his. But Papa, the Philippines was colonized by Spain for 300 years, then by America. They have their own wounds, their own memories of oppression. Diego's grandfather was killed by Japanese soldiers during World War II. His grandmother raised 5 children alone in the wreckage of war. When he speaks about colonial trauma, it's not abstract, it's in his bones just like ours. Chibuzo was quiet, processing. He looked down at Emeka, whose small chest rose and fell in the peaceful rhythm of infant sleep. "I never wanted you to suffer," he said finally. "Everything I built, everything I did, it was to ensure you would never feel the humiliation I felt, never watch someone you love be treated as less than human. I thought if I could control your path, I could guarantee your safety. But you can't, Papa." Amara's voice was gentle but firm. "You can't control the world, and you can't control love. Diego makes me happy. He makes me whole. And yes, our child will face questions about identity, will navigate between cultures, will sometimes feel caught between worlds. But Papa, isn't that better than being trapped in one? Isn't bridge building more powerful than wall building?" "Your generation speaks in metaphors," Chibuzo muttered, but there was a hint of something in his voice that might have been affection. "The world is more complicated than bridges and walls." "I know." Amara leaned forward. "I know it's complicated. But look at him, Papa. Really look at him. The ancestors gave him your face. Not Obina's face, not some generic infant face, yours. Doesn't that mean something?" Chibuzo did look, studying the sleeping child with new eyes. The resemblance was indeed uncanny, almost eerie in its precision. Emeka had inherited Amara's rich skin tone, yes, but the bone structure, the facial features, they were unmistakably Okafor. "I need to meet him," Chibuzo said abruptly. "This Diego. I need to look him in the eye and see for myself what manner of man has stolen my daughter's heart and given me this complicated grandchild." "He wanted to come," Amara said, relief and anxiety mixing in her voice. "I made him stay in Manila until I could talk to you first. But he's ready to fly here tomorrow if you'll receive him." "Tell him to come," Chibuzo said. "Tell him to bring his courage, because I will not make this easy. Tell him." He paused, searching for words. "Tell him that Ezigo does not give his blessing lightly. He must prove himself worthy, not of my money, not of my status, but of my daughter. And of this child who carries my face into a future I never imagined." Amara threw her arms around her father, careful not to crush the baby between them. Chibuzo, still holding his grandson, allowed himself to be embraced, allowed himself for the first time in decades to feel something other than rage at the complications of an interconnected world. "Thank you, Papa," Amara whispered. "Thank you for trying." "Don't thank me yet," Chibuzo replied gruffly. "This Filipino of yours has a mountain to climb before I accept him. And even then," he trailed off, looking down at Emeka once more. "Even then, everything has changed. The world I built for you no longer fits the world you're actually living in." "Maybe," Amara said softly. "That means it's time to build a new one. Together." Diego Santillan arrived in Nigeria 2 days later, carrying nothing but a backpack and a folder containing his artwork. He had barely slept during the flight, his mind churning with every possible scenario of meeting Chibuzo Okafor. The legendary Ezigo, the king of money, the man whose daughter he loved and whose grandson bore his face. Amara met him at the airport, and the moment he saw her, some of Diego's anxiety melted away. They embraced in the arrivals hall, oblivious to the curious stares, 2 people reunited after what had felt like an eternity of separation. "How angry is he?" Diego asked as they drove toward the compound. "He's processing," Amara said carefully. "He hasn't disowned me." He held Emeka. "Those are victories, Diego. Small ones, but victories nonetheless. The rest depends on you." "No pressure," Diego muttered, and Amara laughed despite the tension. The compound itself impressed Diego, not because of the obvious wealth, though that was everywhere, but because of how it was integrated with the land. Palm trees lined the drives, traditional Igbo architectural elements had been incorporated into modern buildings, and everywhere he looked, He saw evidence of a community sustained by one man's vision. Chibuzo was waiting on the veranda, dressed in traditional Igbo attire, a sign, Amara whispered, that he was treating this as a formal occasion. The old man watched Diego approach with eyes that missed nothing, evaluating every step, every gesture, every nuance of body language. Diego stopped at a respectful distance and executed a deep bow. Not a Filipino gesture, but one of universal respect. "Mr. Okafor, sir. Thank you for agreeing to see me." "I did not agree for your sake," Chibuzo said bluntly. "I agreed because my daughter loves you, and because my grandson has your blood. Neither of these facts pleases me. But I am too old and too wise to pretend reality bends to my preferences." "I understand, sir." "Do you?" Chibuzo's voice was sharp. "Do you understand that you have complicated everything? That child, Emeka, he will never be fully accepted by my people because of you. He will always be the one with the Filipino father, always judged, always questioned. What can you possibly offer him that compensates for that burden?" Diego met the old man's gaze steadily. "Love, sir. Identity. 2 cultures instead of 1. And the knowledge that he comes from people who survived, who were colonized, oppressed, brutalized, and who still found ways to create beauty, to resist, to endure. My history is different from yours, but the pattern is the same. I can teach him that survival and pride aren't exclusive to one people. They're universal." "Pretty words," Chibuzo said dismissively. "But words are easy. What do you do, Diego Santillan? How do you plan to provide for my daughter and grandson?" The contempt in his voice was palpable, and Diego felt his own temper flare. But he remembered Amara's warning. Her father will test you, will try to provoke you, will push until he finds your limits. Diego took a breath. "I teach children art, sir. Children who come from poverty, from broken homes, from circumstances that tell them they have no value. I show them that they can create, that their vision matters, that they have worth. I'm not rich. I probably never will be. But I have purpose and I have love, and I will work every day of my life to give Emeka and Amara a home where they're valued. Not for money or status, but for who they are." "And if I said I would give Amara nothing?" Chibuzo pressed. "That by choosing you, she forfeits her inheritance, her place in this family? What then?" "Then we manage," Diego said simply. "It would be harder, yes. But, sir, with respect, Amara didn't choose me for your money. She chose me despite your money. That should tell you something about what we have." Chibuzo was silent for a long moment, studying this young man who had disrupted his carefully ordered world. He saw no arrogance in Diego, but no groveling either. Just a quiet certainty, a man who knew his own worth without needing to shout about it. "Come inside," Chibuzo said finally. "If we're going to have this conversation, we'll do it properly. And bring that folder. Amara tells me you're an artist. Show me what you see when you look at the world." Inside the study, Chibuzo poured 3 glasses of palm wine, a traditional gesture of hospitality that surprised both Diego and Amara. He gestured for them to sit, then settled into his leather chair with the air of a monarch granting audience. "Show me," he commanded, nodding at Diego's folder. Diego opened it with slightly trembling hands. The first piece was a large watercolor of Manila at sunset, the chaotic beauty of the city captured in bold strokes and vivid colors. Chibuzo examined it without comment, then nodded for the next. The second was a charcoal drawing of children in a slum, their faces luminous with joy despite their surroundings. The third was an oil painting of an elderly woman, Diego's grandmother, her weathered face a landscape of survival and dignity. Chibuzo studied each piece in silence, his expression unreadable. Then Diego pulled out the final painting, the one he had created just before Amara left Manila, the portrait of their little family on the bridge. But it was different from Amara's memory. Diego had added to it in the days since her departure. Behind the family, on both shores of the bridge, he had painted crowds of people. African faces on one side, Filipino faces on the other. They weren't fighting or protesting. They were watching, waiting, their expressions mixture of curiosity, hope, skepticism, and gradual acceptance. "This is us," Diego said quietly. "This is what I see when I think about our future. Not abandoning either shore, but building something between them. A place where Emeka can stand and claim both his heritages without apology." Chibuzo stared at the painting for a long time. His eyes traveled from the family at the center to the crowds on either shore, lingering on the African faces Diego had rendered with surprising accuracy and care. "You've painted my people," Chibuzo observed. "I studied photographs of Igbo communities," Diego admitted. "I wanted to understand where Amara came from, who her people were. I wanted to paint them with respect, not as caricatures or abstractions, but as individuals. I don't know if I succeeded, but I tried." "Why?" The question was sharp. Why does a Filipino artist care about painting Igbo faces correctly? "Because they're Emeka's faces," Diego said simply. "Because they're part of who my son is. Because if I'm going to be part of Amara's life, I need to understand that her people aren't just background, they're essential. And sir, with respect, your people and mine have more in common than you might think." "Explain," Chibuzo commanded. Diego leaned forward. "The Philippines was colonized by Spain for over 300 years, then by America for another 50. We were told our language was inferior, our religion was paganism, our culture was savage. We were given Spanish names to erase our indigenous identity. That's why I'm Diego Santillan instead of something from Tagalog or Visayan. My great-great-grandfather was probably named something else entirely, but the Spanish made him take a Christian name or face persecution. During World War II, the Japanese occupied us, and Filipino men were forced to build their death railway. Thousands died. After the war, America kept military bases on our soil for decades, treating our country like a strategic outpost rather than a sovereign nation. Our women were sexualized, fetishized, treated as commodities for foreign soldiers. I'm not saying our pain is identical to yours, sir. I'm not saying I fully understand the horror of the slave trade or the brutality of colonialism as it happened in Africa. But I am saying that we too know what it means to be told we're less than human. We too know about resistance, survival, and the fight to reclaim our identity." Chibuzo was silent, but something had shifted in his eyes, a flicker of recognition, perhaps even reluctant respect. "My father," Chibuzo said slowly, "used to say that the greatest trick the colonizers ever pulled was making us believe we had nothing in common with other colonized peoples. They wanted us divided, competing for scraps of their approval, too busy fighting each other to unite against them." "Sir," Diego said, "I can't change your history or mine. I can't undo the damage that was done to your people or guarantee that Emeka will never face racism or identity struggles. But I can promise you that I will teach him to be proud of all of who he is. Igbo and Filipino. African and Asian. A bridge, not a betrayal." Before Chibuzo could respond, a soft cry echoed from upstairs, Emeka waking from his nap. Amara started to rise, but Chibuzo held up a hand. "Bring him down," he said. "I want to see the three of you together." Amara returned carrying Emeka, who was now awake and alert, his dark eyes scanning the room with that intense concentration particular to infants discovering the world. She handed him to Diego, and Chibuzo watched the transformation that came over the younger man. The immediate softening of his features, the gentle way he supported the baby's head, the unconscious smile that spread across his face. "He has your eyes," Diego murmured to Amara, but Chibuzo interjected. "He has my eyes, and my father's, and my grandfather's stretching back through the generations." He paused, then added more softly, "But he has your tenderness. I can see it in how you hold him, how you look at him. That's not an Okafor trait. We're hard people forged in harder times." Diego looked up, surprised by the almost compliment hidden in those words. At that moment, An elderly woman entered the study, Chibuzo's younger sister, Adana, who lived in a separate compound on the property. She was 70 herself, her hair completely white, her face a roadmap of laughter lines and sorrows survived. "So," she announced without preamble, "this is the young man who has turned my brother's world upside down." Her eyes went straight to Diego, then to the baby in his arms, and her face broke into a delighted smile. "Chinik, he really does look exactly like Chibuzo. It's like time traveling. I'm seeing my brother as an infant again." "Adana," Chibuzo said warningly, "this is not a laughing matter." "Oh, but it is, brother." She settled herself into a chair uninvited and fixed Diego with an appraising look. "Tell me, young man, do you love my niece?" "More than my life," Diego said without hesitation. "And this child, will you raise him to know who he is? Both sides of himself?" "That's my greatest commitment," Diego replied. "I want him to be proud of his Igbo heritage, to speak the language, to understand the traditions, but also to know Filipino culture, to appreciate both islands, the ones in the Niger Delta and the ones in the Pacific." Adana nodded slowly, then turned to her brother. "Chibuzo, do you remember what Mama said to you when you wanted to marry Adiz?" Chibuzo's face tightened. "That has nothing to do with this situation, doesn't it?" Adana's voice was gentle but firm. "Mama said, love is a rare enough thing in this world. When you find it, you hold on to it, even if it looks different from what you expected. You and Adiz weren't from the same village, weren't even from the same clan. There were people who said the marriage was inappropriate, that you should marry within a more defined boundary. But you loved her and she loved you, and from that love came Amara." "That was different," Chibuzo protested. "We were both Igbo, both human," Adana interrupted. "Both people who found something precious in a difficult world. Don't you see, brother? History is testing you. All your life, you've been angry at outsiders for what they took from us. Now here comes an outsider offering to give, offering love, family, connection. And you want to reject it out of principle? Out of old pain? It's not that simple." "It is exactly that simple." Adana stood and walked over to Diego, peering down at baby Emeka. "This child is Okafor. He's also Santillan. He's both, and that makes him stronger, not weaker. The world is changing, Chibuzo. We can change with it, or we can become relics of a past that no longer serves anyone." She placed a weathered hand on Diego's shoulder. "You Filipino man, you will have a hard road. My brother is stubborn, and the community will talk. Some will accept you, others never will. Are you prepared for that?" "Yes, ma'am," Diego said. "I've thought about nothing else for months. But I love Amara and I love our son, and I believe that love is stronger than prejudice. It has to be, or what hope is there for any of us?" Adana smiled. "What hope indeed." She turned back to her brother. "Chibuzo, you've built an empire. You've lifted our people out of poverty, built schools and hospitals, created opportunities where there were none. That's your legacy. But this," she gestured at Amara, Diego, and baby Emeka, "this could be your greater legacy. This bridge between worlds. This proof that we can survive without becoming as hard and cruel as those who hurt us." For a long moment, the room was silent except for Emeka's soft cooing sounds. Chibuzo sat motionless, decades of conviction warring with new possibilities, old wounds battling against nascent hope. Then, without warning, he began to weep. It started as a tremor in his shoulders, then grew into deep, wrenching sobs that seemed pulled from the very center of his being. Amara moved toward him, but Adana shook her head, stopping her. These were tears that needed to fall, a dam that needed to break. "I'm so tired," Chibuzo gasped between sobs. "So tired of carrying this anger. It's been my fuel, my purpose, the thing that got me out of bed every morning. But it's also my prison, and I don't know how to let it go. I don't know who I am without it." Diego, still holding Emeka, spoke quietly. "Sir, you're a man who loves his daughter. That's who you are without the anger. You're a grandfather. A builder. Someone who cares enough about his community to fight for them. The anger was a tool, but it's not you. But they hurt us so badly, Chibuzo whispered. The things I saw, the things that were done to my family, my people. How do I just forgive that? How do I accept that the world is safe enough for my grandson to be of mixed heritage? You don't forgive the past, Amara said softly, kneeling beside her father's chair. You just don't let it dictate the future. Papa, you taught me to be strong, to be proud, to never apologize for who I am. I'm not apologizing. I'm expanding. I'm taking everything you gave me and building on it. Chibuzo looked at his daughter through tears, seeing her perhaps clearly for the first time since she'd returned. She wasn't the obedient child he'd imagined, but something better, a woman of conviction, someone who had inherited his strength, but not his bitterness. I wanted to protect you from everything, he said hoarsely. Every hurt, every slight, every moment of pain. I thought control was protection. I know, Papa. But you can't. Nobody can. And Diego. She reached out, and Diego moved closer, creating a tableau of 3 generations. Diego doesn't make me vulnerable. He makes me stronger. He sees me, Papa. Not as Izigo's daughter, not as a prize to be won or a contract to be fulfilled, but as me. As Amara. Isn't that what you wanted for me? To be truly seen. Chibuzo reached out with shaking hands and, for the first time, took his grandson from Diego's arms by choice rather than circumstance. He held Emeka close, examining every feature, every small miracle of this child who carried his blood into an uncertain future. You will have a complicated life, little one, he whispered to the baby. People will question you, judge you, try to make you choose. But you come from survivors on both sides. Filipino and Igbo. That's not a weakness. Perhaps it's a gift. He looked up at Diego, and something fundamental had changed in his gaze. The hostility hadn't vanished entirely, but it had been joined by something else. A tentative openness, a door that had been barred now standing barely ajar. I need time, Chibuzo said. I need time to reconcile the man I've been with the man I apparently need to become. But Diego Santillan, he paused, the name strange on his tongue but no longer quite so foreign. You may stay. Here in this compound. I want to see how you handle yourself, how you treat my daughter when you're on my territory rather than yours. I want to see if your pretty words translate into decent actions. Sir, Diego began, but Chibuzo held up a hand. This is not acceptance. Not yet. This is an opportunity for you to prove yourself. Fail and you leave. Succeed and we'll see. But know this, you will never take Amara from me completely. Whatever happens, she remains my daughter, Emeka remains my grandson, and they remain tied to this land, this family, this history. If you can't accept that, leave now. Diego met the old man's eyes steadily. Sir, I would never ask Amara to choose between her father and her partner. That's not love, that's cruelty. I understand she's Okafor before she's Santillan. I'm not here to erase her identity. I'm here to honor it while building something new alongside it. Chibuzo nodded slowly. Then we have the beginning of an understanding. Adana, show this young man to the guest quarters. And someone send word to Obinna that if I hear he's been spreading malicious gossip about my family, he'll discover that Izigo's wrath extends beyond business rivals. As Diego moved to follow Adana out, Emeka let out a protesting cry at being separated from his father. The sound made everyone pause, and Chibuzo, still holding the baby, felt a strange warmth in his chest. This child already knew who his people were. Both sets of them. The following weeks were a trial by fire for everyone involved. Diego, true to his word, made every effort to integrate himself into the compound's life and the broader community. With Amara's help, he began learning Igbo, stumbling over the tonal complexities, but persisting with good humor and determination. He attended community meetings with Chibuzo, sitting quietly and observing how the old man managed his business and philanthropic ventures. He also painted. Every evening he would set up his easel in the compound's garden and paint scenes of Nigerian life. Palm trees against crimson sunsets, children playing in the village, the Niger Delta's waterways reflecting golden light. Gradually, people began to stop and watch, curious about this light-skinned foreigner who captured their world with such careful attention. One evening, an elderly man from the village, Papa Nwosu, who had known Chibuzo since childhood, approached Diego's easel. "You paint our home," Papa Nwosu observed. "I'm trying to," Diego replied respectfully, "though I'm sure I miss details that a native eye would catch." "Why? Why do you care about painting our world correctly?" Diego set down his brush and gestured to where Amara was playing with Emeka under a tree. "Because my son will belong to this world. I want to see it through loving eyes, not colonial ones. I want to paint it the way someone who belongs here would see it, with truth and beauty and complexity." Papa Nwosu was quiet for a moment, studying the canvas. "You know what the Portuguese painted when they came? They painted us as savages. Animals. They painted our land as empty wilderness waiting to be tamed. You paint us as we are. Alive. Real. That's all I'm trying to do, sir. Bear witness." Respectfully. The old man nodded slowly. "Chibuzo's daughter chose well, I think. Even if it complicates everything." He wandered off, leaving Diego to wonder if he'd just passed some crucial test. But not everyone was so easily won over. The women of the village, particularly those of Chibuzo's generation, were harder to convince. They whispered when Diego walked by, made pointed comments about proper marriages and pure bloodlines. One particularly harsh afternoon, a group of them confronted Amara in the market, with Diego standing awkwardly nearby. "Your father built everything to protect us from outsiders," one woman said loudly. "And you bring one into his very home? Into his bed, into his bloodline? Shame, Amara. Shame." Before Amara could respond, Diego stepped forward. In halting but determined Igbo, he said, "I understand your anger. I understand I represent something frightening, change, difference, loss of control. But I am not here to take anything from you or this community. I am here because I love Amara and because our son is Igbo, just as he is Filipino. I am not asking you to forget your history. I am only asking that you let me learn it, respect it, and help carry it forward." The women were stunned into silence, not just by his words, but by the effort he'd made to speak their language, however imperfectly. The lead critic opened her mouth, closed it, then said grudgingly, "At least you try. That's more than most outsiders do." It wasn't acceptance, but it was a crack in the wall. The real turning point came 6 weeks after Diego's arrival, during a crisis that no one could have predicted. A fire broke out in one of the village schools that Chibuzo had built, an electrical fault in the aging wiring. It happened during evening classes, and dozens of children and teachers were inside. The local fire response was slow, and by the time help arrived, the building was fully engulfed. Diego, who had been painting near the compound's entrance, heard the screams and saw the smoke rising. Without hesitation, he dropped his brushes and ran toward the fire. What happened next would become legend in Umuafor. Diego, despite having no formal training, organized a human chain to evacuate the building. He ran into the burning structure 3 times, once pulling out 2 young children who had been trapped in a back classroom, once dragging out an elderly teacher who had been overcome by smoke, and finally returning for a 3rd time when someone screamed that a child was still inside. That final trip nearly killed him. Part of the roof collapsed as he searched, trapping him briefly under burning debris. But he found the child, a girl of 7, and shielded her with his own body as he crawled toward the exit. When he emerged, his arms and back were severely burned, his lungs were damaged from smoke inhalation, and he collapsed unconscious before he could hand the child to waiting arms. Chibuzzo, who had arrived just in time to see Diego disappear into the inferno for the third time, had felt his heart stop. In that moment, all his carefully constructed prejudices, all his principled resistance evaporated. All he could see was his grandson's father dying in flames to save children who weren't his own, in a community that had barely accepted him. Diego was rushed to the hospital in Port Harcourt. Ironically, a hospital that Chibuzzo's money had built. For 2 days, he hovered between life and death, his lungs struggling, his burns infected despite the best care available. Amara never left his side. Neither did Chibuzzo. In the sterile white hospital room, with machines beeping and Diego unconscious between them, father and daughter finally had the conversation they'd been avoiding. "If he dies," Amara said, her voice hollow, "if he dies saving our people after everything." "He won't die," Chibuzzo said fiercely. "I won't allow it. I have the best doctors, the best equipment. He will live. Why do you care?" The question wasn't accusatory, just exhausted. "I thought you wanted him gone." Chibuzzo was quiet for a long moment, watching Diego's chest rise and fall with mechanical assistance. "I watched him run into that building," he finally said. 3 times. Everyone was telling him to stop, that it was too dangerous. But he kept going. "Do you know what I saw?" Amara shook her head. "I saw a man who understood what it means to be part of a community. Not transactionally, not for profit or status, but genuinely. He could have walked away. Those weren't his children, not biologically, not culturally. But he saw them as his responsibility anyway. That's the kind of man I wanted for you. I was just too blind to recognize him when he didn't come in the package I expected." Tears streamed down Amara's face. "He's so stupid," she whispered affectionately. "So brave and stupid and good. Papa, I can't lose him." "You won't." Chibuzzo took his daughter's hand. "And Amara, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for making this so hard, for being so rigid, for almost missing what was right in front of me. Your mother would have loved him, I think. She always had better judgment about people than I did." On the 3rd day, Diego woke up. His first words, rasped through damaged lungs, were, "The children? All safe," Amara sobbed, gripping his hand. "Because of you. All safe." Diego smiled weakly, then his eyes found Chibuzzo standing at the foot of the bed. "Sir," he croaked, "sorry about missing our morning meetings." Chibuzzo laughed, actually laughed, for the first time since Amara had returned home. "You stupid brave boy," he said, moving closer. "You nearly orphaned my grandson and widowed my daughter before you even married her. Do you have any idea how foolish that was? Calculated risk?" Diego offered, wincing as speaking aggravated his damaged throat. "Reckless heroism," Chibuzzo corrected, but his eyes were warm. "However," he paused, clearly struggling with what came next, "it appears I've been wrong about you. Stubbornly, foolishly wrong. A man who would risk his life for children who aren't his own, in a community he barely knows, is a man of character. You are not what I wanted for Amara. But you are perhaps what she needs. What Emeka needs. What I need to learn from." Diego's eyes widened. "Sir, when you're recovered," Chibuzzo continued, his voice gruff with emotion, "we will discuss marriage properly. A real marriage, blending our traditions and yours. And there will be no more talk of proving yourself. You've done that in the most dramatic, terrifying way possible. Your family now, Diego Santillan. Whether I'm entirely comfortable with that fact or not." 3 months later, on a day when the Delta air was sweet with rain and possibility, Amara and Diego were married in a ceremony that became the talk of Southeast Nigeria. It was a wedding that belonged to no single tradition but honored them all. The morning began with Igbo customs, the Amuna presenting lists of requirements, the wine-carrying ceremony where Amara sought out Diego among the gathered men, the breaking of kola nuts and prayers to the ancestors. Diego wore traditional Igbo attire, the fabric rich with patterns, and spoke his vows in carefully rehearsed Igbo that made the elders smile with approval. Then in the afternoon, Filipino elements were woven in. Diego's mother had flown in from Dubai, and she brought with her elements of a traditional Filipino wedding: the ugol, wedding lace, the coin ceremony symbolizing prosperity, the release of doves. A Filipino choir sang "Akoi Pilipino," and then seamlessly transitioned into Igbo praise songs. The crowd was a tapestry of faces and colors. Igbo villagers mixing with Diego's Filipino family and friends who had made the journey, all of them initially wary but gradually warming as the celebration unfolded. Children of both cultures played together, language barriers dissolving into the universal language of joy and games. And at the center of it all, Chibuzo sat holding his grandson, watching his daughter marry a man he had once despised but now grudgingly admired. Papa Nwosu, sitting beside him, leaned over and said, "The world is changing, old friend." "It is," Chibuzo agreed. "And perhaps that's not entirely a tragedy." When it came time for speeches, Chibuzo stood, and the crowd fell silent. He had been known to give powerful orations, but this time, his voice was quieter, more personal. "I am Izigo," he began, "the king of money. I built an empire from oil and anger, from determination and pain. I thought I knew exactly how the world should work, how my family should look, how the future should unfold. And then my daughter came home with a Filipino man and a baby who looked exactly like me, and all my certainty crumbled. I won't lie and say this has been easy. I won't pretend I didn't resist, didn't rage, didn't try to hold on to a vision that no longer fit reality. But I've learned something these past months, watching Diego become part of our community, watching him nearly die for our children, watching him love my daughter with a devotion that requires no translation. I learned that love is not betrayal, that bridges are stronger than walls, that my grandson Emeka, who carries both worlds in his blood, is not diluted by that mixture but enriched by it. He will face challenges I cannot fully imagine. He will navigate between cultures in ways that will sometimes be painful. But he will also have twice the history, twice the strength, twice the reasons to be proud. To Diego and Amara, you have my blessing. Not because you're what I wanted, but because you're what the world needs. Proof that we can honor our past while building something new, that we can remember our wounds while refusing to let them define our future. That love really can be the bridge that history forgot to build. The crowd erupted in applause. Diego, standing beside his bride, felt tears stream down his face. Amara squeezed his hand and whispered, "We did it. Against everything, we did it." "We're doing it," Diego corrected. "This is just the beginning." On a warm evening, 3 years after that wedding, Chibuzo sat on his veranda with Emeka, now a precocious 4-year-old who spoke Igbo, Tagalog, and English with equal fluency and perpetual confusion about which language he was using at any given moment. "Lolo," Emeka said, using the Filipino word for grandfather that Chibuzo had gradually accepted. "Papa says you were angry when I was born." Chibuzo paused, considering how to answer. "I was scared," he said finally, "which sometimes looks like anger." "Why scared?" "Because you were different from what I expected. And old men like me don't always handle surprises well." Emeka considered this seriously. "But I'm good surprise, right?" Chibuzo pulled his grandson close, this impossible child who carried the future in his mixed blood and his grandfather's stubborn face. "You're the best surprise, very best." In the garden, Diego was painting while Amara sat nearby, her hand resting on her swollen belly. Their second child was due in 2 months, a daughter they would name Adiz Mariana, honoring grandmothers from both worlds. Inside the house, a school was being planned, not just an Igbo school or a Filipino school, but an international school for the Delta region, where children would learn about colonialism and resistance from multiple perspectives, where African and Asian histories would be taught as equally important, where bridge building would be considered an essential skill. Chibuzo watched his family and felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Peace. Not the peace of control or certainty, but the deeper peace of acceptance, of growth, of evolution. The oil that had made him ease ego was running out, as all resources eventually do. But this family, this bridge, this proof that love could transform even the most hardened heart, this would outlast any material wealth. Lolo, Emeka said, tugging on his grandfather's sleeve. Tell me the story again, about how you and Papa became friends. We're not friends, Chibuzo said with mock seriousness. We're family. There's a difference. What difference? Friends you choose. Family chooses you. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, they choose you even when you're being a stubborn old fool who doesn't deserve their patience. Emeka giggled, not fully understanding but sensing the love beneath the words. And Chibuzo, the king of money, who had spent a lifetime building walls to protect his heart, discovered that the greatest wealth he possessed was the family that had torn those walls down and taught him, finally, to truly see beyond them. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications so as to get new stories. Like and share to lovers of Afro/Filipino stories. Drop your comments below, and I will see you in my next story.